So I wanted to share some thoughts with you today. The topic that I was thinking about discussing was mobility versus strength and why you need both in equal measure in order to have a pain-free and healthy existence. So 90 to 95% of the patients that come into my chiropractic practice are either low back or neck pain patients. In both of those types of patients, what I found is that lack of mobility and rigidity in the associated joints nearby almost always causes the neck and low back pain. It's very uncommon that the neck itself is the source of tension or the low back itself is the source of tension. Most often with low back pain patients, it's actually the femoral acetabular joint where your femur or your thigh bone inserts into the capsule in the hip, the femoral acetabular joint. Similarly, with the neck pain or even upper back and mid back pain, it's almost always that glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint that's lacking range of motion and mobility. Oftentimes, another thing too is that absolute range of motion is not as important in my experience as symmetry between the two sides. So for instance, if one hip is tighter than the other, and usually that's lacking in rotation, then you'll have asymmetrical pulling forces from one side to the other, kind of pulling the hips off or pulling the shoulder girdle off, and then causing unequal distribution of tension on each side. And that can kind of pull the whole joint out of whack. If you think about rigidity versus mobility, there's often like a continuum there. So if you think of it as as a spectrum, you've got on one end hypermobility, which is too much motion, and those are usually people lacking in muscle tone. In extreme cases, you might have somebody with like a Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or a ligamentous laxity of some sort. But on the other end, you would have rigidity, which would be, think of like a rigid bodybuilder, somebody who is insufficient in movement in general. What you want is really to find something right in the center. So you want to be strong enough to maintain form, and you want to be mobile enough to maintain an appropriate range of motion, neither too much nor too little. If you look at the consequences of this on the extreme ends, on the mobility side, you would have something like dislocation or ligamentous laxity, like I said, an Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or something, where the joint actually moves too far. And you could see this in hyperextension or something like that, even in a healthy joint, in an acute sense. On the other end, you'd have rigidity. And the way that you can think about this is like the extreme range of rigidity would be arthritis. So that's where the joint has lost its capacity to move in that direction that you're trying to take it. This is actually a pretty intelligent response by the body. So the body is saying, if you're not going to use this range of motion, I'll just pack it in with bone. I'll fundamentally alter the architecture of the structure so that there's no need to maintain all of this joint range of motion if you're just never going to use it. So arthritis is something, and I'm talking about osteoarthritis here. Inflammatory arthritis is something fundamentally different. But when most people say the word arthritis, what they're talking about is bony remodeling in response to continued stress and years and years and years of just not utilizing a full range of motion. The joint capsule just kind of dries up. The bone will actually go from having a nice smooth topography to something more rigid and kind of with these little outcroppings of bone. Sometimes they'll be called bone spurs or osteophytes. That's something on the extreme end. So again, what we're trying to do is find something right in the middle of this. So what we're going to talk about how to actually do that. So the first thing that you can do to maintain that joint mobility is walking. Just go for a walk every fucking day. There's no reason not to do this. You can either do it on a treadmill, you can do it outside, you can do cycling, swimming, any type of low intensity kind of cardiovascular exercise that's going to put the joint into motion. What this will do is the legs and the muscles in the legs will constantly be pumping blood up through those capsules, and you'll have a diffusion of tissue with intercellular fluid, which acts as almost like a lubricant for the joints. Another thing you can do that you should be doing is mobility work. This is something that for many, many years I overlooked to my own detriment, but I've addressed this now. The main ways that you can work on mobility for the shoulder is hanging, okay? You can just grab onto any type of bar, hold the hands above the head, and just let the weight pull you up. Let your own weight pull you. If you can't do this initially, if you can't hold your own weight, you can always just put your knees or your feet on the floor or do something like that that'll take a little bit of the stress off. This is also going to increase the strength in your joints, in your grip, which is a great indicator of health and longevity. It's going to help you with chin-ups, pull-ups, things like that. And hanging is also going to kind of separate that glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint out of its socket and just create a vacuum in there where synovial fluid can kind of flush in there and lubricate the joint. It'll also stretch that joint capsule and kind of give it some resiliency over the long term. The two best ways to increase mobility in the hip that I've found so far are, one, to do what I'm doing right now, just sit on the floor. So instead of constantly sitting in a chair and, relaxing in a big, soft, comfortable chair, just sit on the floor. It's very simple, right? Like, so when I read in the morning, I sit down on the floor in a position like I am now, cross-legged, and I just kind of read for an hour and a half. There's nothing really that complicated about it, right? Just sit on the floor. When you go to get up, try not to use your hands if you can. At first, when you do get on the floor, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So you might need to kind of brace yourself, push against something, grab onto the couch, grab onto whatever it is that you need to. That's fine. But you should get to a point where you should be able to stand up without the aid of your upper body. And as you're sitting, you can sit in all types of positions. You can sit cross-legged like this. You can sit in the traditional Japanese fashion with your legs kind of tucked under you, almost like they're when they used to perform calligraphy or sit and drink tea. And you can also sit in a squat position. You can sit in pretty much any position you want. Just sit on the floor. Trust me, very quickly you'll start to see that the muscles in the lower back will start to loosen up and so forth. Another thing that we need to do is we need to be emphasizing full range of motion training. So I've been doing personal training in some way or fashion for the last probably 25 years. And the most common thing that I've noticed is people don't take their motions through a full range of motion. When they're doing the bench press, they kind of stop short of lockout. When they're doing curls even, they stop short of lockout. And the biggest culprit here is the squat. Most people are stopping at 90 degrees. I'm going to say that that's fundamentally a mistaken way of performing that movement. You need to be going ass to grass. If you can't go ass to grass with the weight that you're bearing on your shoulders, you need to cut the weight down. It's just that simple. It's better to own full range of motion, deep ass to grass squats with 135. That to me is more impressive than squatting 315 or even 4 pies and not breaking parallel. You don't own the range of motion, you don't own the weight. And when you see this, these people that train in these limited range of motions, 5,000 pounds on the leg press, whatever the case may be, they have tremendous strength within that narrow band of range of motion. But then at the extremes, at lockout or at deep stretch, they have no range, none. They can't even get the weight moving. And what's going to usually happen is you're going to get injured at those ends of the extreme range. So if you don't have that range, you're going to find that a real life activity is going to demand that of you. You're not going to be able to meet that, and some sort of tissue is going to give out, right? That's how injury happens. So if you've been training for a long time, really get into the gym, cut the weight down, and kind of reinvent your form. Really, like for instance, on a shoulder press, let that bar come all the way down to the chest. Hold it, pause there, maintain that static contraction, and then push all the way up to a full lockout, okay? Get those joints going through a full range of motion. This partial rep shit, it's not helping you. It might stoke your ego, but it's ultimately going to almost certainly lead to injury and cause you to not be able to train at all. So refocus on range of motion. Slow the reps down a little bit at first. You can later work on explosive movements and things of that nature. But you got to slow it down and kind of reinvent your form. This is going to really help you not only to develop fuller muscle bellies and more aesthetically pleasing, longer, leaner muscles, but it's also going to get you in a position where you're injury resilient, I should say. Another thing that we can think about in regards to this is water. You need to be drinking water, okay? You can drink coffee and tea and milk and stuff like that if you want, but most people are just not drinking any water. So you've got this capsule around each joint, which is, we'll think of the ball and socket joint, like the glenohumeral joint. You've got the humerus here. It's sitting in the joint, and it's kind of moving around like so. This area here, this is not dead space. There's a fluid that fills this. It's called synovial fluid, and it's basically joint fluid. If you're not drinking enough water and your diet is shit and you're eating inflammatory foods and just garbage all the time, your body's not going to have that nice amount of synovial fluid to cushion and lubricate the joint. Okay, so you got to be drinking plenty of water. I don't think there's any real magic formula here. A lot of people will talk about, gram or liters per body weight, whatever. It's all just trash. Just drink water all day long, okay? As far as diet's concerned, if you're eating like an asshole, you're going to feel like an asshole. Okay, so if you're eating a bunch of processed garbage and candy and pizza and all that crap, you're going to be inflamed and you're just going to be in pain. It's that simple, okay? So again, let's go back to sitting on the floor. Just do your daily activities on the floor, okay? Rather than thinking of it as something that you need to set aside time for, find something that you like to do and do it on the floor, okay? Sometimes I'll sit and play guitar on the floor for an hour. That in and of itself is a stretching session. It's something that makes me feel good, and it's something that just is a no-brainer. I'm already going to play guitar, so I might as well do it on the floor. Now, this being said, the last thing I want to say is that in order to gain mobility and strength, you need to work at this every single day. That might sound like a lot, and maybe it is, but that's just the fact. So if you're not willing to set aside time every day to move with purpose, you're going to feel like shit. That's all there is to it. Okay, so a lot of people that I talk to them about activity levels. They'll say, oh, I went to the store today and I gardened and stuff. Those are all great things. To move throughout your day, that's a good thing. If you're getting 5,000 steps at work, great. But there's something really fundamental and sacred about setting aside time each day to specifically exercise and to specifically care for your body, okay? It's not just a residual kind of effect of other things that you happen to be doing. It's not like, think of it as setting aside time for something that actually matters. And there's nothing that matters more than taking care of your body. So again, guys, work on this every single day. A moderate amount of time investment will be fruitful. Even 15 minutes a day. Sit on the floor, sit in a squat position, hang from a bar. It's that simple. Then when you get time and when you have the opportunity, go for a nice walk. Take your dog for a walk. Go for a walk with your kids. I don't know, but set aside time specifically for walking. This isn't walking at work or walking in the grocery store. It's me saying to myself, it's worth it to spend the time to focus on my health and on my longevity. Okay, so we'll talk about different topics here. I'm going to try to come up with a different topic to bring up. And if anybody has anything that they want to hear about, just put it in the comments below and I'll be happy to discuss it. All right, be well.